be back in my office after the trip to Washington, D.C. and the historic first annual March for Marriage. It was a great opportunity to team with other national leaders. And quite frankly, I was just inspired by the amount of people, the enthusiasm of the people, the class of the people, with a genuine interest to preserve marriage in this country. And for all the media and others who are saying the youth, I mean, they're far gone, they're never going to be with us on this issue, there were hundreds of youth amongst the thousands of people supporting one man, one woman marriage. And it's not just happening in the United States. One of the guys who showed up on Monday night when I was in Washington, D.C., he flew in from France. And in France, they had a reported 1.7 million people show up for the institution. This is France, for the institution of marriage. And so I think what a lot of people are doing, even in this country, we saw with the justices yesterday, they're kind of putting in the clutch and say, let's take a break, let's take a deep breath, and really let's try to determine where we're going here. Because we have 2,000 years of recorded history of one man, one woman marriage. And I think one of the justices said we have 5 years of same-sex marriage, and now we need to make a decision that the country needs to be all for same-sex marriage. So my message obviously focused on marriage being as God instituted it, as nature revealed it, as well as science substantiates it. But I also talked to the court because that's what our history is in Iowa. Here we saw what a court did in usurping the obvious will of the people. And so I really encourage the court to exercise judicial restraint and let the people's voice and vote be upheld with DOMA and with Proposition 8, and let us as a country walk through this. What's really kind of ironic, probably not ironic, it just is, it was the first march of any type that I've ever done. And so we walked in Washington, D.C., through the mall, through kind of the sand and gravel roadway that was just after a snow the day before. And it was wet and everybody's just kind of sloshing through. And anytime that somebody got a little bit like, oh, look what we have to go through, somebody said, think what the founders of this country had to go through. And so we kept sloshing through, and some were singing and some were chanting, but it was all positive. Everybody was a real spirit of joy there. And then we turned the corner to go in front of the U.S. Supreme Court building where the arguments were going to be heard that day. And then the opposition, which was probably a tenth of the size of our marchers, were on either side of the street. And they started closing in, and I get claustrophobic quickly anyhow, in elevators, airplanes, those type of things. This was starting to be a claustrophobic moment for Bob Vanderplatz. And then they got in front of the march, they started waving their rainbow flags, and they started yelling out at us, calling us different things. And again, the marchers stayed very, very composed, very poised, because we want to operate and represent God with class and with dignity. And even at one point, Brian Brown, to his credit, he asked everybody to go to one knee and to just pray for a second. Because it was going to be a very tense situation. So we all went to one knee, and then about 30 security guard came, and they started ushering us through slowly and moving the protesters from our march. And one of the pastors that I was kneeling down by, he got up and he said, that's one of the first times I ever remembered being really fearful for my physical safety. It was a tense moment. There's no doubt there's a lot of energy around this issue. And that's why I think the Supreme Court would make a disastrous mistake of creating a constitutional crisis and usurping the obvious will of the people. So at the end of the day, and again what I said in my remarks, I think we need to take the lead from our founders, from the Reverend Billy Graham, from Pope Francis, our faith leaders, who are very clear that marriage is and it will always be one man and one woman. Just like in Matthew 19, where Jesus says, pretty much, duh, have you not read, have you not heard? God created them male and female. And what he joins together, no man, no court, no legislator should put asunder. So this is not about what we're against. Matter of fact, I have a great deal of love for our opponents in this deal, a great deal of love for them. But this is